They say monsters don't cry, but I saw one kneel in the rain, cradling a bloodstained locket like it was the last heartbeat left in the world. And if you've ever believed that even the coldest hearts can still remember love, make sure to like and subscribe, because what I witnessed that night proves that some promises don't die, even when the people who made them do. It began on a night when the city felt hollow, the kind of night where every street lamp flickered like it was afraid of the dark it was meant to hold back. I was sheltering under the crumbling archway of the vampire citadel, a place no sane human went after dusk when the wind changed, carrying the metallic scent of rain and blood. Out of the storm stumbled a boy, no older than 8, barefoot, mud-streaked, eyes too big for his face. He clutched something close to his chest, trembling so hard I thought he might vanish into the mist. Then, before I could even move, the great obsidian gates of the citadel, sealed for almost a century, groaned and swung open. A sound like thunder, then silence so deep it felt alive. The boy looked up at the black spires towering above him, took one shaking breath, and stepped through. I followed because I had to see what could drive a child into the kingdom of monsters. The vampires were already waiting, rows of crimson eyes glimmering in the shadows, armor catching the lightning. And at the end of the hall, on a throne carved from living stone, sat King Lucien Valor, the immortal ruler whose name mothers whispered to frighten their children. When the boy fell to his knees and held up the locket, even the guards hesitated. "Please," he rasped, voice breaking. "Please bring back my mom." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the king rose. It was said Lucien could silence storms with a word, and that night I believed it. The air itself seemed to freeze as he descended the steps, his cloak dragging through puddles of candlelight. He took the locket from the boy's trembling hand, and when he opened it, something in his face cracked. I saw it. Grief, disbelief, something raw and human flickering behind the predator's calm. Inside the locket was a miniature painting of a woman. Dark hair, fierce eyes, a face too alive for the grave. Her name, the king whispered, was Leora. The court gasped. I'd heard the stories, that centuries ago, before he turned his heart to stone, Lucien had loved a mortal woman named Leora who vanished on the eve of the Great Purge. But that was legend, a myth. Yet here was her child, bleeding and begging at his feet. The boy said her name like a prayer. He said she told him that if the world ever went black, he should come find the man who keeps his promises. Lucien's jaw tightened. I swear I saw his eyes flicker crimson, then silver, the color of mourning in vampire kind. "Where is she?" he asked, but the boy only shook his head, saying the pale men took her, the ones with the burning eye on their armor. The court erupted. Inquisitors, someone whispered, ghost soldiers from the old wars, long thought extinct. But Lucien silenced them with a glance. "Bring him to the inner chamber," he commanded, "and bring me my seer." The boy tried to rise, but his legs buckled. The king caught him before he fell. For a moment, the great vampire king stood in the middle of his court holding a fragile, half-dead child in his arms, and the sight of it unsettled even the oldest among them. Later, they said that when Lucien placed a drop of his blood upon the locket, the whole citadel shook. The air filled with the scent of iron and roses, and a pulse of red light spread through the throne room like a heartbeat waking after centuries of silence. I saw it myself, shapes forming in the mist above the locket, a vision of a woman bound in silver chains, her eyes burning with desperate fire as she whispered his name. The boy screamed. The vision shattered. The locket went dark, but I could still feel it humming, alive with old magic. The king's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "She's not dead," he said, more to himself than anyone. "She's calling me." And for the first time in living memory, the vampire king looked afraid. The court murmured warnings, begged him not to go after her, that it was a trap, that the humans meant to draw him into war again. But Lucien didn't answer them. He turned to the boy instead, his voice softer than rain. "Your mother's blood calls to mine. That means she once saved me. Now I'll return the debt." The boy's small fingers clung to his sleeve, and for a moment, I could almost believe they were father and son. Outside, the storm howled harder, as if the sky itself was trying to warn them both. But Lucien only looked down at the child and said, "Sleep now. When you wake, we'll go find her." The torches dimmed, the locket gleamed faintly in his hand, and the sound of his next words lingered in my mind long after the hall emptied. "Even monsters," he said, "must keep their promises." That was the night I stopped believing in legends and started following one. The Citadel never slept after that night. Every corridor whispered with rumor. Every candle flickered like it feared what dawn might reveal. The Vampire King had broken his silence. For the first time in a century, he was leaving the throne behind, and he wasn't going alone. I saw him at dusk, armored in black and silver, the boy beside him in borrowed boots that were 2 sizes too big. The locket hung at Lucien's throat now, glowing faintly like a second heart. "Stay close," he told the child, and when the gates opened, the wind rushed in as though the whole world had been holding its breath. They disappeared into the storm, and I followed at a distance, because I had to know what kind of love could pull an immortal into danger. The path through the wastelands was long and cruel. The sky bled crimson and ash, the earth littered with the bones of forgotten wars. Lucien moved through it like a shadow carved from regret, his eyes scanning every flicker of movement, his hand never far from the blade at his hip. The boy, Aaron, I learned his name, barely spoke. When he did, it was always of his mother. How she sang to him during thunderstorms. How she said the light loved him too much to let him die. Every word was a knife in Lucien's chest. One night, as they rested near a ruin of stone angels, Aaron asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Were you really her friend?" Lucien's voice was low, almost lost to the wind. More than that, he took the locket in his hand and turned it over like it was something fragile. "She saved me once, long before you were born, when I was less a man than a monster." Aaron looked up at him, eyes wide. "Then you'll save her too." Lucien didn't answer. He didn't have to. The promise was already there, heavy and unspoken. By dawn, they had reached the shadowed edges of the human lands, where crosses burned in the soil and whispers of old magic clung to the trees. The boy slept as Lucien traced the perimeter of an ancient ward with his claw, breaking it open with a hiss of power that smelled like iron and storms. "They're here," he muttered, and the air grew cold. Out of the mist rose shapes in crimson armor, inquisitors, human once, now something darker. Their leader stepped forward, silver runes carved into his face. "The pale men welcome the king of the damned," he said with a mocking bow. "You've come to die for love." How quaint. Lucien's eyes flared, and for an instant, the forest itself seemed to recoil. "Where is she?" "Still singing your name," the inquisitor sneered. "In the cathedral of blood and bone. But hurry, my lord. The ritual's almost complete." He lifted a hand, and the others moved like hounds unleashed. What followed wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Lucien blurred through them, faster than sight, a storm of claws and blade and fury. By the time the wind stilled, the ground was painted red, and only one inquisitor remained alive, pinned against a tree by the king's sword. "Why her?" Lucien demanded, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. The dying man smiled, blood running down his chin. "Because she carries what you lost, a soul that once loved you. Our master wants it for himself." Then he laughed until Lucien silenced him with a twist of the blade. When it was over, Aaron stood in the clearing, trembling, staring at the bodies. "They said she's alive," he whispered. "Then she is." Lucien's voice softened. "And we'll find her." They left the forest before the moon rose again, following the trail of blood sigils that burned faintly in the dirt. Each one pulsed like a heartbeat, leading them eastward, to the ruins of an old human fortress now reborn in black stone, the Cathedral of Blood and Bone. Its towers clawed at the night sky, and the air around it shimmered with forbidden power. From its highest spire came the faint echo of a voice. Leora's voice, singing the lullaby of the old world, the one that could make even the dead remember warmth. Aaron ran ahead, but Lucien caught him, gripping his shoulder hard. "Not yet. It's a trap." "I don't care." "You will," the king said quietly, "when you understand what they've made her into." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes, not of battle, but of what love could cost. And as the gates of the cathedral creaked open on their own, spilling red light onto the ground, I realized the boy's plea had set something ancient in motion. A promise was calling to be kept, and the night itself would bleed before it was done. The Cathedral of Blood and Bone was less a place than a wound upon the world, a place where love and pain had been carved into stone. I remember the way the air changed as Lucien and the boy crossed its threshold, how the torchlight bent inward, as though the shadows themselves bowed to their king. The great hall was silent except for the hum of the ritual, a deep pulse that throbbed beneath the floor like a sleeping heart. Silver chains stretched across the ceiling, glowing with cursed light, and at the center of it all, suspended between life and death, was Leora. Her body shimmered like glass, her spirit half-anchored to the ritual circle beneath her feet. The sight stopped Lucien cold. For the first time in 6 centuries, the vampire king looked broken. "She's alive," Aaron whispered, his voice trembling with hope. But Lucien's eyes darkened. "No," he said softly. "She's bound." Then came the voice that made the walls tremble, smooth, familiar, and sharp enough to draw blood. "You should have stayed in your tomb, brother." From the shadows stepped Archon Varric, his pale armor streaked with blood runes, his smile stretched too wide. He had been Lucien's right hand once, the warlord who helped forge the peace between vampires and humans before betraying it for power. "I told you love would be your ruin," Varric said. "And now, thanks to her, I'll have the strength to rule in your place." He turned to the boy, and the runes beneath Aaron's feet flared. The child's blood completes the circle, half mortal, half immortal. The perfect vessel. Aaron cried out as the light lashed around him, threads of crimson energy wrapping his limbs, dragging him toward the altar. Lucien lunged forward, claws tearing through wards that should have been unbreakable, roaring words older than fire. "You will not touch him." The cathedral trembled. Statues cracked. The spell faltered for a heartbeat, but Varric's hand shot out, striking Lucien with a surge of power that sent him crashing to the ground. "You're too late," he hissed. "Your bloodline ends tonight." But the king only smiled through the pain, his fangs catching the light. "No, Varric," he rasped. "It begins tonight." He rose, slow but steady, drawing the blade forged from his own heartstone, a weapon that could kill even him. If blood is what binds, then blood will break. In one swift motion, he sliced his own palm and pressed it to Aaron's chest. Power flooded the air, wild, golden, alive. "Take it," Lucien whispered to the boy. "Take what I no longer deserve." The circle exploded in light, tearing the cathedral apart from within. I shielded my eyes, but even through my fingers I saw it. The exchange, the impossible unmaking of a curse. Aaron screamed as Lucien's immortality poured into him, the power of centuries condensing into the fragile body of a child. Varric stumbled back, his spell unraveling. "No, this isn't how it's meant to." But before he could finish, the blood magic turned on him, devouring the corruption he'd sown. His scream echoed until it didn't sound human anymore. Then there was silence. When the light faded, the king was kneeling, trembling, the color draining from his skin. The crimson in his eyes was gone, replaced by the gray of mortality. Aaron lay beside him, breathing, the locket clutched to his chest, glowing with quiet warmth. Lucien reached for it, and the faintest smile touched his lips. "You see," he whispered, "even now, she keeps her promise." Then the chains above them shattered, and Leora fell into his arms, her body real and warm again. For a moment, time stopped. She touched his face like she was afraid he might vanish. "You fool," she whispered, voice breaking. "You gave it all up." He smiled faintly. "You once gave me life. Now I return the favor." She tried to hold him, but his body was already fading, the centuries unraveling into dust. "Look after him," he said softly, his hand trembling as it brushed Aaron's hair. "He's what we were meant to be." The sun broke through the shattered dome then, real sunlight, the first the cathedral had seen in ages. It poured over Lucien's face, and for an instant, he looked young again, peaceful. "Beautiful," he breathed. "I've forgotten." And then, like mist and dawn, he was gone. Leora wept quietly, the boy holding her hand as the light filled the ruins, washing away the blood and darkness that had ruled there for so long. When they finally walked out into the open air, the storm had passed. The birds were singing again. Aaron turned back to look at the cathedral, its spires now cracked but glimmering with sunlight, and whispered, "Even monsters keep their promises." The locket in his hand pulsed once, soft, golden, and for the first time in centuries, the vampire king's realm felt alive. The boy had inherited more than power. He carried hope. And sometimes, that's the strongest magic of all.